Hi everyone, I'm so excited today to have with me Amy Costello, Sustainability Manager at Armstrong Flooring, to talk to us about some really interesting initiatives that Armstrong has for flooring solutions. Amy, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Reveal program?
Sure. Reveal's our new sustainability platform that we have just launched, and it really has sort of three pillars for now. We really are focused on being more transparent and disclosing more information about our products, and we're doing that from an air quality perspective by having floor score certifications for all of our products, and from an environmental product declarations and health product declarations. And we're making sure that we're actually going to third-party certify our health product declarations so that we're really providing that information that our customers are asking for.
There's a lot of things in there that you just said that I'd love to unpack a little bit. You know, the first thing you talked about was, just having certifications and declarations for multiple kind of dimensions of sustainability. So
yes.
You spoke about air quality, you spoke about carbon footprint, and then you talked about environmental product declarations and health product declarations. Yes. Tell us a little bit about why it's important to have, that full range of information about Armstrong Flooring's products.
I think being transparent is so important, and I think it's one thing for the manufacturer to understand it, but I think by opening yourself up and being transparent and disclosing information, you're allowing sort of cross-functionally multiple people to look at what you're doing. And by bringing all those people to the table, you're really able to make changes, and really big changes in your process, because they see things that you might not necessarily see, and I think it really helps speed up your pathway to sustainability.
So I understand. I mean, having third-party verification on so many different dimensions, I'm sure, pushes you at Armstrong Flooring to do better. And I think when you do better, it has this kind of multiplying effect because, yep. For interior designers, flooring is a category where sometimes they can make the biggest impact because by volume, it will be one of the biggest, yep. Products that they specify. So for anyone who's looking at an interior design project and wanting to, achieve sustainable performance or health performance, flooring is one of the first things they should be looking at, right? Tell us about sort of how you've been able to push forward on some of those aspects around health and sustainability with your flooring product.
Sure. So from a sustainability perspective, we do environmental product declarations for all of our products. We've been doing life cycle assessments since 2007. So we've been doing life cycle assessments before EPDs and environmental product declarations were even really a thing or an issue. And so by doing those, it really helps. And I think EPDs are really more for the manufacturer. It helps us understand where our products have impacts. So are there impacts in our supply chain? Are the impacts in our manufacturing facility? And it gives us the tools and the levers to be able to make changes to make our products better. And then with the health product declarations, we know what's in our product, but we're going for that verification process and working with our suppliers. And it's really been eye-opening to work with our suppliers more closely. Our procurement teams always have worked with them, but to bring in our sustainability teams and have a different set of people working with procurement, it's the ideas, the innovation, the excitement in what you've discovered by going through that process is pretty amazing.
Absolutely. I know. I'm sure those documents are really useful for you to kind of, keep pushing forward and getting better and better. Mm-hmm. And again, for interior designers, those are really important documents too. If you're looking to, design a well-certified space, you're looking to, support human health, health product declaration is absolutely vital. And an environmental product declaration, there's so much discussion now about the carbon footprint, mm-hmm. Of projects, and you can't calculate the carbon footprint of your project if you don't have EPDs from the manufacturers that you're specifying. Exactly. But I know on carbon footprint in particular, you've made some great strides, especially with LVT. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So we just launched a 2.5 millimeter LVT product, and it's actually 31% lower carbon footprint than its sort of predecessor product, which was our 3.2 millimeter product. And you might say, oh, wait a minute, Amy. You've just reduced the material. So of course it's going to get better. And that is part of the story. That is part of the story. But it also, by reducing the materials, you reduce the weight, which means you can put more on the truck, which means you can ship more out to the customer. We've reduced the weight so it can actually go down the line faster because it doesn't take as much time to dry it. So then there's an energy component. And when you look across the life cycle, we've really done a lot of work by making that change to really reduce the impact that product has. So we're really excited about it. And I think probably more about being excited is we've marketed that. And so I think now, instead of working compartmentalized, our operations team, our product team, our marketing team, they're seeing the response from the market and how our customers and architects and designers are excited to see and to hear that we're reducing it. And I think that helps that connectivity even within our own organization to be able to better embed sustainability in what we're doing. And I think that's a huge step forward to be able to push us down our sustainability journey.
That sounds amazing. And LVT is such a challenging chemistry to work with in terms of reducing carbon footprint. So it's really great to hear you hit that milestone, reducing by 31%. And as you said, doing it through optimization of materials. And it's amazing how one move can have all of these kind of ripple effects throughout, the impact of a product. Armstrong Flooring products also have a really high performance standard because, you're often going into really high traffic spaces, really demanding interiors. Can you tell us about balancing sustainability and performance?
Sure. What I always tell our customers is they should pick performance first, because nothing is more unsustainable than putting in a product that will not stand up to the environment and having to come back. And I've seen it happen. They've put a product that was really sustainable and it just couldn't handle the foot traffic or the load that was going to be on it, and they come back and they have to tear it out, and then they have to put the right performing product in there. So I always tell people to pick the performance first, and then within that category of products that perform, then look at comparatively the sustainability attributes and then select based on that. But it is definitely, you want to put the right product in first.
Absolutely. Paying attention to how long products last and thinking about the life cycle or extending the use of products as much as possible is the first step. Thank you so much, Amy. It's been incredible to hear about Armstrong Flooring's offerings. Remember, folks, flooring is a really important product category for you to pay attention to when specifying for human health, when specifying for sustainability. So if you want to know more about how Armstrong Flooring can help you with that, head on over to armstrongflooring.com for more information. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey design friends, this is Cindy Allen, Editor-in-Chief of Interior Design again, and it's Benjamin Moore Takeover Day all day today, and aren't we all lucky? Aren't you loving it? Right now, I want you to imagine we're good and go to Flanders, New Jersey, to their impressive laboratory facility. We're going to take a tour and get a little behind the scenes while talking about paint and your favorite aura. And with me today is Harriet Martins, Project Manager for Benjamin Moore. Hi, Harriet. How are you?
Hi, Cindy. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I feel a lucky gal because I have been there, and I will always think of Flanders as Benjamin Moore.
Yes.
Always, because I never heard of Flanders, New Jersey before. But it is so, you drive up and you're taken back, because the first thing you see is the test farm, which looks like a glorious art installation. But why don't you, so designers, we just drove up and we're at the test farm. Tell us about the test farm.
Great. Yeah. So our test farm is within our facility, which is 80,000 square feet. And what we do on the test farm is it's really a torture test for some of our exterior paints. We put product out there, and some of the product has been out there for years, decades, really taking the time to understand how the paint will react to different elements. And being that we live in New Jersey, we get a little bit of everything. We get rain, snow, sleet. So it's really that torture test to understand in a real life scenario, how will these paints react, making sure that we're producing the highest quality, durable products that we can.
Yeah, so so you're testing, but tell us the key things you're testing for.
Sure. So we're testing for things like surfactant leaching, making sure that the paint won't peel, and specifically that the paint won't fade. So those are 3 definite problems that are out there that we want to solve for, and making sure that we're solving for them not just in the short term, but in the long term, because it's such a big investment when you paint your home that you want to make sure that not only is the color beautiful and it's what you want, but that it's going to stand the test of time. And that's what the test farm gives us, is that view of those problem areas and how we can solve for them.
Yeah, I mean, it makes so much sense. And look, you need to be somewhere where there's a lot of land because it
Yes.
goes on forever. You have a lot of paint to test, right?
Absolutely. And we have actually boards that have been out there for decades, just trying to learn different things, different formulas that are out there. We have our own paints, we have competitive paints. So it's, making sure that we're broad in our view of what we're testing, and we're testing different colors,
Yeah.
in addition to different formulations. So making sure there's a myriad of things out there so we can learn and adjust and really blend that into our formulations.
Yeah, no, and it is so gorgeous, I have to say, that any designer should come out there just to go and see the test farm. But let's talk about R&D, research and development, and this is a huge facility. Why don't you tell us how big it is and how many chemists are there? Give us a scoop.
Yes. So we have 8 different labs within Flanders, and each one focuses on a different area. So for example, we'll have our interior lab, and of course they're focused on interior paints, and our exterior lab will focus on exterior paint. So making sure that there's experts in each of those fields, because an interior project is different than an exterior project. So there's different things to look for and different expertise. So we have about 100 people on staff there. So between chemists, chemical engineers, a lot of support staff, really the best of the best, all coming together to produce the highest quality products that our customers are looking for.
Yeah, we don't always think about it in these terms either, but you're also working on patents for everything too, right?
Right. So our mantra is all about innovation and making sure that, we're coming to the table with cutting edge technologies. And because of that, we have about 46 patents out there, over 100 foreign patents. So
Yeah.
it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so I'm there. We're at the lab. There's going to be a lot of things we don't understand, and we don't want to get too scientific about it either. We are designers after all, but can you tell us how a product actually does get formulated?
I can. So it really starts with the concept or an idea. And then with that, we meet with our chemists so they can understand, what does that end state look like? What does that final product look like?
Yeah.
And then it takes a lot of formulation work. At times it could be, a few years. In other cases, it could be many years. But it's all in making sure that we're crafting the right ingredients. But it's also not just about the right ingredients, but making sure there's a balance and a customization of those ingredients in order to achieve those attributes that we're looking for those specific projects. So it takes a lot of formulation work, but I will say it does take a lot of testing as well, testing and adjusting as we go along. And we have all of those different test methods within our Flanders facility for us to do that.
You talk about ingredients and actually high quality ingredients. So
Right.
what are a few of those, and explain that to us?
Right. So one of the key ingredients within paint is the resin, and for us, we develop the majority of our resins. So those are developed by our chemists. We own them, and they're specific to our products. So that's a key ingredient that we use in our paint. The other being colorants. That's also, we have our own proprietary colorants that we've developed as well that we use in our products. So those are 2 of the key ingredients that we are lucky enough to be able to have the talent and the innovation to develop.
Yeah, I learned a little bit too, like that resin works best with pigments and additives work best with resins or something like that, right?
Right. There's definitely a balance. So depending on what the product is, there's the intricacies of those things coming together and working. And there's trade-offs, and you have to balance those trade-offs and making sure that you're putting in the right amount of each ingredient, and making sure that there's as minimal trade-offs as possible.
Yeah, the hard stuff that makes it look like easy when it's figured out, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's move on to a big innovation and really a favorite in the industry, which is Aura, right? So when was it developed, and what problems were you trying to solve with Aura?
So we launched Aura back in 2007, and the mission was to develop the best can of paint that we could across all attributes. But really, it was to make sure that there was no color that was off limits. So at that time, a problem was that if you wanted a deeper color, potentially that color would not be as durable. So for us, the mission was to develop the best paint in terms of color depth and richness, but making sure that it was going to last and be durable, and that there would be no trade-off whether you want something like Simply White or you want something deep like Caliente. You're going to be able to get your color choice without any trade-off to the performance that you needed to have.
All right, so there are specific proprietary technologies with Aura. Would you share them with us?
Sure. So with Aura, it is about continuing to be the best in the industry. So with that, we're excited that we're coming out with the reformulation or the next generation of Aura. And with that, there's 3 exclusive technologies that we've developed behind it. One is going back to that resin. So there's a brand new resin that we've developed after a few years of formulation, which is exclusive to Aura. And it's a resin that has, and not to get too techy again, but it has these copolymers. And what that means is just it's building durability, more durability into the product. So that's one of the innovations behind the reformulation of Aura. We'll still have color lock technology, which is another proprietary technology exclusive to Aura again. And with color lock technology, it's embedding those pigments into the paint. So as you can imagine, you don't want pigments sitting on the surface. You want them to really get locked into the paint in order for them not to be able to rub off, and in order for you to have that durability as well. And then the third piece is the colorants.
Now, I just want people to kind of understand, because some of it, I mean, sounds really good, but some of it we don't understand as well, which is okay. But you were trying to solve problems that were happening in the paint world, right? So can you kind of explain some of the problems that you were having?
Yeah, I think one of the problems was really that, depending on your color choice, that you would have to make a trade-off. So with that, it was making sure that there's durability across the full spectrum of colors, whether it's a light color or a deep color. And at the same time, it was making sure that the aesthetic was not compromised either, so that you have color richness and depth and that very smooth finish that you want. So from an aesthetic perspective, you're getting that color vitality that you need, but at the same time, the color is going to be long-lasting and durable and not be resistant to scuff and stains, color rub-off, all of the things that you need in terms of that investment to your project.
You talk about a Gen X color technology, right?
Yes, so we have Gen X Colorants, which is our colorant platform for all of our products.
Uh-huh. Yeah, explain that a little bit.
Sure. So with Gen X Colorants, which we launched in tandem actually with Aura back in 2007, our Gen X Colorants were solving the problem that when you added colorant into the paint, you were actually degrading the paint. So it was, and with Gen X Colorants instead, not only is it the complete opposite, you're not degrading the paint, but you're making the paint that much better. So with our Gen X Colorants, it's improving hide, it's improving durability, it's improving the application of the product. So that was really groundbreaking then and now, because it's still a technology that hasn't been replicated.
Right. I love it's all spectrums too. So it's like the richness of color, but also the cleanest of whites, right?
Exactly, and that's exactly what we were trying to achieve with Aura, just making sure you have the cleanest of whites to the deepest of reds. So again, just having that flexibility, that color choice without needing to trade off on anything else.
Yeah, what's one of your favorite colors where you feel, because you talk about it like very passionately about those like deep colors?
Yeah, one of my favorite colors actually that I just painted one of our rooms in is New York State of Mind. So I am definitely a blue person, and that deep blue of New York State of Mind is something that I just finished painting one of our bedrooms in.
Oh, really? Okay, designers out there, check it out. New York State of Mind, Deep Blue. All right, it took like 5 or 6 years, I think you were said, to develop Aura.
Yes, so back when we launched in 2007,
Yeah.
it was definitely 5 or 6 years in the making.
Yeah.
And now the reformulation as well took about 3 or 4 years to really, it was already the best can of paint. So our challenge and our mission to our chemists was, how do you make it more perfect than what it is today? And they delivered by, again, looking at new innovations, new technologies, and really formulating something that could still give us that color depth and richness, but then looking at longevity and dry film properties and making sure that it will be long lasting as well.
Yeah. So okay. So let's fast forward to today and tell us what is happening in the marketplace right now.
So I think customers are definitely more critical of their choices and what they're using in their home. So we've seen that as, top of mind, making sure that they're investing in something that's worth it and making that investment in their home, and looking for products that are worth the investment and that are going to give them the longevity that they need.
Yeah. Yeah. And the designers really respond to Aura, don't they?
They do. Yeah, it's actually, when we came out with it in 2007, we knew it was great.
Yeah.
But having that affirmation from the design community, it's one of the products that is used and spec'd a lot. We get a lot of accolades about Aura in terms of the color depth and richness, about the fact that it's durable. So it's definitely become a favorite. And, of course, that makes us extremely happy.
Harriet, tell us about Color Stories.
So Color Stories is a very sophisticated palette that we have. It's about 240 colors. And one of the interesting things about it is that it's a multi-pigment formula. So typically you have products that only have 3 to 4 pigments, but in Color Stories' case, you have about 6 to 7 pigments. And there's also the omission of black. So that accentuated response to lighting gives you potentially one look in the morning versus a different look in the evening.
Yeah, this is a little quicker course. Black makes it easier, but it's kind of like a quick fix, but it's not the right fix. Instead, using colors instead of using black makes it richer and deeper, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, because we do that in printing too.
Yes.
So I love that. I love that when you talk about that, I'm like, oh my God, I know that. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, Harriet, so what colors are designers specifying right now? What are you guys seeing in the market?
So what we're seeing right now is definitely a desire for colors that are more tranquil, more soothing. So with that, we're seeing blue really stand out a little bit more than the other colors as a favorite.
And you just did that. You were proof pudding, right? You just painted blue, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Harriet. Well, first of all, I love the lab. I love going there. The test farm is amazing. Thanks for all the science. I feel a little smarter and a whole lot more inspired. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy. We hope to have you back out as soon as we can.
I'm coming. With some designers.
Hello and welcome to DesignTV by SANDOW. I'm Lisa Bingham Dewart, the magazine's LA, Southern California, and Pacific Northwest Homes editor. And today I'm delighted to be speaking about investing in you, wellness upgrades for the bathroom, which is a hot topic these days since we still are spending so much time at home. Speaking to this topic today, we have two very knowledgeable guests who are going to be sharing some insights. First of all, we have Devin George, who is the general manager of Robern. And we also have Alyssa Wilterdink, who is the Senior Channel Manager at Kohler. So we're delighted to have both of these experts on today to chat about new developments for the bath with a specific focus on wellness. I think we've all been thinking a lot about our mental health and well-being over the last 18 months. So it's a really important topic that we are going to be covering. Before we dig in, though, about some of these really cool things that your companies are offering at the moment, I'd like to start off chatting about some things that you're seeing for this space. And this is something really important to me because I'm actually coming off of a bathroom remodel myself. So I'm in that zone. So obviously for both of us, or for both of you, the last year and a half has changed a lot about how we live and given us a lot of time to think about how we want to live. So with that in mind, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in the bath? If you'd had a crystal ball a year and a half ago, would you have predicted some of these? Alyssa, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think, certainly we're seeing a lot of change. I think what I'd add is we're also seeing just acceleration of trends that we had been watching. So things like, the bathroom as a sanctuary, prioritizing yourself, finding that me time in your day. We've, on our side, been really excitingly watching consumers really lean into some of those things for several years now. I think, as an example, in just their interest in taking baths again, especially among younger consumers. Today, over 70% of consumers are saying that they like or love to take a bath. Among millennials, it's over 80%. So I think, when you think about how much more time now is spent at home and how many roles our homes now host, and, if you've got kids at home, how much chaos sometimes is there, I think that's really just amplified and accelerated some of those things. Just a really well-designed primary bath that you can escape to for privacy, restoration physically, but also mentally.
And Devin, how about you? What are you seeing on your side of things? Are there certain things that you've been kind of spying over the last few years that have amplified or accelerated, or are there some new things that are happening in the space that you're excited about?
Sure. So I think Robern and myself, we've seen two really main things as a result of the pandemic when it comes to trends. And it all has to do with families being home more and really needing more out of their homes. So the first is all about optimizing the space and its functionality. So how you use your space has changed and become so much more important. So some examples might be, even outside of the bathroom, a dedicated home office. It's so much more popular today. I know this office I'm in certainly didn't exist 2 years ago. And mudrooms. So mudrooms with sinks are becoming really popular, where before the sink was not common in the mudroom, but people want to come in, wash their hands, and just use that space a little differently than they have before. So as it applies to a bathroom specifically, that's always been a key space in the home, but we really need to optimize our routine to improve our mental health. It's really where you start the day. You start off by going into your bathroom, getting yourself ready for the day. And where you end your day is where you ease into your nightly routine. So it really needs to be a healthy space that enables you to keep mentally healthy, physically healthy in your daily routine. The second trend. So the second trend is all about safety. And that is so important in the home now, that the entire family is there and sharing that space more frequently. So we have been particularly interested in safely storing medications because we learned this shocking fact. So let's see, I have it up on screen. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services tells us that 10.1 million people misuse prescription opioids in just the past year. So after reading that, we did some surveys and learned that through further research, homeowners are looking for additional storage options so that they can keep their families safe as a preventative measure and give themselves more peace of mind.
So Devin, thank you for that overview. And on that note, I wanted to talk about one of Robern's recent products that really speaks to that, which is the IQ Digital Lockbox. So can you kind of walk us through that product and what it means in the bath space?
Sure. So the IQ Digital Lockbox is a new product from Robern that really lets homeowners keep personal items like prescription drugs safely stored in their medicine cabinets. So it mounts securely into most of our medicine cabinets and is designed to really just disappear into the cabinet It's very seamless and unobtrusive. So to go along with this digital lockbox, we've also developed an app that connects to it via Wi-Fi. And that's really what's so amazing about this product is it gives the homeowner full visibility to all lockbox activity, when it's open, when it's closed, when it's tampered with. So you can really monitor and log all activity and even schedule events and get reminders to take medications. I know that I could go 2 days without taking a daily medication without some sort of reminder. So it really helps there. The app really does provide peace of mind to any household where there's prescription drugs because they could really get into the wrong hands and unfortunately misused. A few more things at the lockbox that I'll just mention. It can be opened at the cabinet with a keypad. It can be opened via your smartphone, or if needed, you never want to not be able to get to those medications you may need. There's actual a mechanical backup key you can open it with as well. So we're really excited about the new product and really think any home would benefit from it.
That's awesome. And I love that there's sort of the fail-safe that you have with the backup key, just in case the power goes out or something and you're stuck. So yeah, so that's pretty exciting. And I know that I was actually just reading recently that medicine cabinets are sort of having a renaissance, and people are thinking about those more in the home as opposed to in times past. So that was an interesting detail that I recently learned. And then you have one other really fun thing, a little less about safety and peace of mind, but more just like creating a mood. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the tunable light, just because in the bathroom, lighting is really critical. I mean, for everything, you might want to have lower light to ease into your day and ease out of your day, or really good bright light for your kind of morning getting ready routine. So can you talk us through what the tunable light means for us?
Sure. So as you mentioned, lighting is definitely one of the most important elements, but often overlooked in bathroom design. So the placement, the brightness, and in particular the color temperature, it helps you create an atmosphere that can stimulate your senses and also really just show your bathroom in its best light. You just remodeled your bathroom. I'm sure you want to show off all those gorgeous finishes you've chosen. Not to mention you want to look great, right? You want to start your day and just feel good about yourself. So adjusting the color temperature, or specifically the warmth of light, lets you shift the mood and improve your daily routine or well-being. So cooler light can be used to create a more stimulating or energizing space. It's perfect for tweezing or shaving. So I personally use cooler light in the morning before I go into the office, because office light is often very cool and I want to see what I'm going to look like in the office. And maybe on the weekend before going to my son's soccer game, I also want to use the cooler light, because cool light actually simulates the light from the sun. So again, I can simulate what I'm going to look like before I go to my daily activity. In the evening, I like warmer light. So that's because it creates a warmer, relaxing spa-like environment, and that can really help me ease into my nightly routine. So by controlling that brightness and color temperature, I really can improve my day ahead or my night's sleep. And I guess with that tunable light and the need for tunable light, Robern has introduced a new product called Tune Technology. So it's technology that enables you to adjust the brightness or the color temperature of your light with really beautiful on-product touch controls. So they're on our Uplift Tech medicine cabinet, and they allow you to choose personalized settings that you've created, or we've also pre-programmed them with the most popular settings.
So Alyssa, we've heard about some safety features that Robern offers and some really great developments around lighting. Kohler has some amazing developments around bathing and showering, which are really kind of turning our sort of compressed, life schedules into, meaningful moments, which I think is so great. And we can take them where we can get them and really hold on to them. So the heated bubble massage, I thought sounded amazing and has some really amazing additional features. So can you walk us through all of the ins and outs of this kind of crazy cool product?
Yeah, of course. I mean, our story started with baths. So I think naturally it's a category that means a lot to us and is a category that, like some others, we really pour into to make sure that we're bringing absolute best experiences to market. So I think, if you're a bather or if not, you might become one after hearing a bit more about this. Hydrotherapies are really the ticket to a really restorative bathing experience. So at Kohler, we have 4 different hydrotherapies, ranging from, things focused on revitalization, whirlpool or heated bubble massage, to just sort of blissful relaxation with some therapies we call effervescence and vibroacoustic. So you mentioned heated bubble massage. That's our newest of the 4. It solves a problem that 8 out of 10 consumers surface as a strong deterrent to bathing, and that's just the cooling of the water. If you put in time to go ahead and take a bath, that sensation you get when you first enter and the warmth is something that you want to extend. So heated bubble massage, is certainly a lever to help do that. So with that hydrotherapy, there's air jets in the bath that are releasing thousands of heated bubbles for a really invigorating full body massage. So the system is actually using humidified air to apply heat really in 2 different ways. So first, the bubbles themselves are coming into the bath and physically warming your skin as they touch you. And then kind of secondary benefit is as they then disperse into the water, they're helping to keep the water that you're in warmer for longer. So it's a really great experience and certainly helps to extend sort of your time in the bath. We like to say that any of our hydrotherapies that use bubbles make you feel like you're sort of like sitting in a glass of champagne, which is really, really delightful, especially when you think about that experience having this added layer of just heat that's sort of continuing the experience. So you can take advantage of heated bubble massage or other therapies, kind of mixing and matching the ones that are really going to make the most sense for you across, available across really a wide variety of styles, sizes, and even installation types, depending on what's best in your space.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. And then another great Kohler product that I want to share with everyone is the DTV Plus system. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. The number one attribute that consumers tell us they're after when they're sort of embarking on a new project is they want their bathroom to feel like a spa. And I think, that's where DTV Plus comes in and really just expertly delivers on something that, nearly everyone is looking for. So it's really, the best in class showering system. It brings together, 4 really critical elements: water, steam, lighting, and music. And really as the owner, you've got the ability to sort of personalize which of those experiences will be most meaningful for you and to sort of arrange the outlets accordingly. So you choose the functionality you want with each outlet, kind of mixing those different elements together. And then from a control perspective, through settings in the physical remote or more recently through our Kohler Connect app, you've got the ability just right at your fingertips to really kind of personalize the perfect showering experience for you, and others in the space can do the same, just to really elevate that experience. So DTV Plus is outstanding. If you're not quite ready to dive, fully into that system, we've got other digital showering platforms too. DTV Prompt is sort of our entry-level solution for digital showering. And then there's also DTV Mode. So both really exist to just elevate that everyday showering experience with intuitive controls and just an ease of experience and an experience that's really personalized to exactly the way you'd want your shower to be. So all 3, are amazing. And, if I might just add, for anyone who's about to start a project or just embarking on it now, we have a brand new showering platform that is outstanding in aesthetics, functionality, the experience it's going to bring, and that's set to hit the market right at the turn of the year. So I think that's really just going to bolster the breadth of solutions available from Kohler, from the digital showering platforms and beyond, to just really help you achieve that spa-like experience right at home.
that's amazing. I mean, now I'm like regretting that we already remodeled our bathroom. We have other bathrooms. Maybe we'll have to do another one soon to get to incorporate some of these amazing new products. So I wanted to thank you both for being here, Alyssa and Devin. It was a pleasure to kind of get the inside scoop on what you have out there right now and what's coming up. So thank you so much again, and thank you everyone for joining us on Design TV. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for tuning in to this special segment that's a part of the new Statement Bathroom Takeover on Design TV. My name is Sarah Shelton, and I am the market editor at Luxe Interiors and Design. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Erin Lilly, Global Design Manager of the Color, Material, and Finish Studio from Kohler, and superstar interior designer Mikkel Welch. Together, we'll be walking through 3 exciting trends in the kitchen and bath spaces, and also be showing some of the exciting product from Kohler that illustrates those trends. So I suggest grabbing a pen and paper because you will want to take these notes heading into 2022. But hi, Erin and Mikkel, and thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you both on and to talk about some of my favorite things, which are design trends. So when we talk about interior trends, we have to remember that those trends do in fact trickle down to faucetry, and that color, material, and finishes of those finishing touches bring real distinction to a kitchen or a bathroom. So Erin, how does Kohler track these trends and then deliver on those findings?
Kohler is rigorous in wanting to understand the consumer and their desires before they're even articulated. So one of those aspects in understanding the consumer is our rigorous research and forecasting. So our products are objects of permanence and longevity within the house. So we have the luxury of seeing trends come down the pipeline, but we have this responsibility to make sure that we're picking and manufacturing and producing the right colors, materials, and finishes, because these are products that need to resonate not only in the moment, but throughout the lifespan of your home, through refreshes of interiors and renovations. So we track fashion, art, jewelry, automotive, consumer electronics, and we look at what our interior designers are doing and understanding what they need. And then we take all of that, filter it down, and identify the opportunities of what to bring to market.
Well, the trends that we're going to touch on today, I think definitely have some legs to them and some longevity. So let's jump into the first trend, which I myself have definitely been seeing in the marketplace, and that's the rise of warm colors. I mean, we're seeing brown, taupe, cream, and of course, brass, these colors across all sorts of categories: fabric, wallpaper, furniture, tile. Mikkel, it's not in the distant past that we're all talking about grays and stainless and these cool vibes. From your designer perspective, can you confirm that the needle is in fact moving toward warmer tones, and why you think that is?
Oh my gosh, I feel like if you haven't jumped ahead and jumped on this needle, you're basically missing the point at this point. I think people right now, especially in the times that we're living in, we want things that are warm. We want things that are cozy. And people do want to step outside of the norm. We've been sitting in our houses looking at them for the longest time. And you know what? Now it's time for us to really let those homes shine. So brass has been kicking it up. We went from like the evolution of like the rose gold, I think, where we were kind of like testing it out. And now people are like, yes, let's go ahead, let's embrace brass. And I think it was one of those things where honestly, brass kind of got on the fence. I would say, I won't say a bad connotation, but it was an on the fence connotation, where before it was like brass, it was like, oh, it's like the super shiny 70s that people didn't want. But I think people are now gravitating to the warmer hues as opposed to it just being shiny, shiny, shiny. The brass trend and matte black, when we talk about warmer tones, matte black and brass, I feel like as long as you have those two things in your home, you are right on point.
Amazing, amazing. So Erin, tell us your thoughts on this and also walk us through some of the nice warm tones that you all are offering. You know, I didn't really stop to think that, you know, it could be so chic to have a sink base that is not stark white. It can be a nice cream. You know, so tell us, and we're going to show some visuals, but show us or tell us some of these nice warm tone products that you guys have.
First off, totally agree with Mikkel. Like, this is not the brass that your grandma had in the 70s and 80s. It is softer, warmer, more approachable, earthier, because in fact, what's the underlying curve here, trend here is people want to get closer to nature. And getting closer to nature doesn't necessarily always mean bringing in greenery or indoor, outdoor living. It's simply like bringing in material sets that reflect our natural surroundings. So brass is definitely one of those aspects. Again, yeah, we're totally seeing the downtick of those cool grays that used to dominate for over a decade. People want to warm up the space. We call it kind of a cocooning aspect. So one of those simple changes you can make, like you said, is in a lab. You think about what you're going to pair that lab with, and majority of the time, more often than not, people are using a classic marble or quartz proxy. So you think about those Calcutta golds, Carraras, any of your lighter limestones, they all have an off-white base. So when you pair them with a white lab, it's going to be stark and it's going to call it out in not the best way. So a simple change, but a very powerful change, is switching that lab color from white to a dune. And our dune is the softer shade of white. It's very complementary, and it's going to completely blend into those classic countertops. And it's going to make the space look sophisticated. It's going to feel luxurious. It's amazing how these small changes can happen. And then if we jump back to finishes, if brass is too bold for you or a little too much, simply changing chrome to a nickel, something that's a little bit more depth in its finish. It's going to reflect, it can still be cool, but it does have dexterity to work with warmer spaces and those warmer palettes we're seeing brought in. And lastly, I would say French gold. French gold's been around for a while, but it is absolutely stunning to see it in these creamier environments, you know, picking up those hues of the terracottas that we're seeing trending. It's stunning.
Can I just say something really quickly?
Yeah.
I feel like Erin just gave like one of those Oprah aha like nugget moments. And I had one literally as I was sitting here, I was holding back because I couldn't say anything. But when you said switching that sink basin from white to dune, it makes a world of a difference. It's just like as an interior designer, I know all white paints are not created equally. So the same thing with your sink. So when you said it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it clicked. I got it. Just even listening to you say that. And I think a lot of people need to step outside of that traditional thought that like all sinks are created equal. And they're really not, because not all white paints are created equal. So I think you've got.
I don't think I'm gonna be able to look at I'm not gonna be able to look at an apron sink the same ever again. So jumping to the next trend, which Mikkel, you kind of teased a couple minutes ago, we're calling it blending in and standing out. And it's all about matte black. You know, we've been seeing it in appliances and decorative accessories. And now here we are with matte black sinks and faucets. I think this look is incredibly chic. But Erin, you know, sell this one to me if I'm a customer walking into the showroom and I'm seeing this for the first time and I'm kind of blown away or think that maybe it's not for me.
Let's think about it. Black is classic. Black is timeless. But even the classics need to be refreshed. And that's where we come in with the matte black finish. It is an instant classic, but it's fresh and contemporary because it can transcend traditional and modern silhouettes. It's a chameleon. It can create a bold moment within the space if you pair it with black hardware, and you can create a really graphic statement, but it can also be just that moment of pause within a very bold composition. It can be the anchoring color of your palette. And it's the same thing with the fixtures, just like I said with using Dune. You can use black as a complementary color and be very tonal and have it almost fade away, or it can be the statement piece within the composition.
Makes total sense. And I love that you said that it could transcend styles. And this is where I wanted Mikkel to jump in and answer. It obviously looks so good in these contemporary spaces that we're showing, super sleek, super refined. How could we make this in more of a trad way? I mean, I know you said, Aaron, that black is classic and, every style can adopt that color, but Mikkel, how would you, maybe to a client, tell them how it could work in a more traditional manner?
So here's the thing, if it's a more traditional home, I would probably lean more towards the brass side, but you can still have the accents of black. I think like you're never going to walk into a kitchen, everything is going to be brass or everything is going to be matte black. So I really think it's the pairing and how you do it. The thing that I like about the pairing of the matte black and the brass is the fact that you have the capability to set the tone in terms of the percentage that you want to go more modern versus more traditional. So I think if you're someone who wants to gravitate towards the more traditional side, but you just want to update it slightly, you can totally do that. Even with like Kohler's tone faucet, for instance, I'll use that as an example. It could be something as subtle as making sure that all of the hardware continues to be that brass finish that's going to lend more towards a traditional home that you would traditionally think of. And again, I think it's really about how we make a home ours. So I think a lot of design rules are kind of like being thrown out of the book, and now we're trying things out. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like, things become a trend because some designer took a risk. And I think now people are stepping outside of their boxes and they're open to taking more risk. And that's really, I think that's the biggest thing. You can be traditional and take a little bit of risk.
Making it yours and not having to feel like you have to follow a prescribed bucket. And that's where matte black has that surprise element if you wanted to bring it into a transitional or a traditional composition or style narrative.
Absolutely. I really think it goes back to creating something that's just for you. I say it all the time, like people shouldn't create spaces for their mom, their dad, their cousins. You're creating a space that is just for you. And I think that's the key with all aspects of design.
Well, perfect to end on this last trend, which is all about making your own mixed metals. So Mikkel, for the record, can we just confirm that you can mix stainless and brass, black and gold? I feel like it's a age-old debate. You cannot mix metals, but why are we so nervous to do this? And please just give us the permission that we can.
And I think the key word that you use right there is permission. I think a lot of times we wait for permission. We wait for Joanna Gaines to tell us it's okay. Well, I'm here to tell you, like, Joanna's amazing. I love her, but it is okay to mix your metals. I think oftentimes people get nervous because they don't have a plan. And I tell my clients, and anyone who asks for design advice, just like me, I plan it out, I research it, I look at how other designers have done things, and I see what works. So it's a matter of planning and studying. Don't just go out and just buy everything that you see in matte black and brass. You need to plan it out. See why this particular hardware worked with this particular countertop, or why painting, the cabinetry made that hardware work. So I think it's just a matter of planning it out, but you can totally mix metals. I do it all the time. We all do it. You do it naturally. Most people, when you walk into your house is going to have a stainless steel refrigerator if you see it, but that doesn't mean everything needs to look like the Jetsons. So feel free to switch it up a little bit. You have to.
Oh, phew. I'm glad that we can put that to rest. So Aaron, we have some gorgeous examples of how Kohler is mixing metals, not just in different products, but in a single product, which is pretty cool. So this is definitely a compelling design play. Tell us some combos that could help illustrate this. Give us some ideas on execution. I know you guys have two-tone pieces, and then also you have some spaces that we're going to show that just mix metals in really chic ways.
Yeah, so like Mikkel said, mixing metals is a hallmark of a good designer or someone who has a good design sense, because you think about it in fashion, you think about it in your home. You don't want to be monolithic. You want to create depth within the space using the colors, materials, and finishes. So we use that inspiration to create the two-tone finish on our tone. And we combined matte black, so that classic, with brass, and you've got this really high contrast, but really engaging finish combination. Or you have it in a matte black and a chrome, which is a little bit safer and dexterous in its application. But creating a mix and match finish doesn't have to be within the tone collection. We have artifacts, composed components. These are all faucet collections that in a widespread or a wall mount setting, you can mix and match not only the handle styles, but finishes and material sets. So you'll see in our artifacts, we introduced a Nero Marquina handle, and it looks absolutely beautiful with the brass finish. But you can play with finishes within the composition in itself, and that's a really daring move, but it could be a very interesting move to make the handles a matte black and have it fade into a Nero Marquina top and let the spout be a bold color, like a brass or a chrome or a nickel.
Yeah, these examples that we've been showing, I think, are so helpful in envisioning how it can be done. I even love that there's this example of a brass mirror near a chrome or a stainless steel faucet. It's so chic. And I actually think it's perfect for maybe a commitment phobe who can't decide which one they want. You can have both and you'll have a chic space no matter what. But we just covered so much here in such a quick amount of time. I can't wait to see and track these trends in the coming months. But thank you, Erin and Mikkel, for sharing your expertise, and hats off to Kohler for keeping us on our toes and constantly pushing the envelope in the kitchen and bath space. We can't wait to see what you guys do next. So be sure to tune in to some of the other programming that we have for the new statement bathroom. You definitely do not want to miss it. So see you next time, and big thanks to Erin and Mikkel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we have all followed along and continue to follow along on your Instagram as you restore Chateau.
That's my passion and my addiction.
This is your passion, your addiction. It's been so interesting to see how you have restored the Chateau, and particularly you've done a lot of posts about paint.
Yes.
And I have just been on my phone and been so transfixed by how you've used paint at the Chateau. Talk a little bit about, some of the colors and how you've used, I think, Benjamin Moore paint specifically to transform and restore.
Yes, it's interesting because Benjamin Moore is fairly new to Europe, and I'm so thrilled that they are there now because they have an expertise that has been incredibly helpful to me on this new Chateau. I've worked with them. We've discussed what the surfaces are. They've sort of taught me things that I never even knew. I kind of was embarrassed that as a designer, I did not know some of the things that you use a different paint on a plastered wall versus a drywall. We don't have drywall in the Chateau, but I never knew that there was a difference between that. Different kinds of types of paints for different surfaces. So they've been incredibly helpful in helping me with that. They also, I think what I've learned is I've actually taken off all the centuries and the layers of paint. Part of my passion for doing this with these old structures is it's almost a form of urban archaeology, because as you start to take off layer upon layer, you start to see, oh gee, it was painted this color at this point, and then before that it was painted in another color, and you start to get a sense of what's in fashion, what the periods were, and how choices are made. So I've loved that, and taking off all the layers of paint, getting back to the raw wood. It has some of the most incredible carved paneling room, very detailed with three-dimensional birds and fruits and just amazing things. If you had just painted all of that white, all the details would just sort of disappear. But by actually picking out through color, through paint, some of these details, you actually appreciate it so much more. So it's been really so much fun to get to choose those colors and figure out what's going to accentuate the architectural detailing that makes the place so special in the first place.
You know, you transition the color from room to room. And I want to hear from you, how as a designer do you make that cohesive? So if you want to vary the paint color from room to room, yet not have it be too disparate, and how it all works together.
I think it's interesting. You have to go back to the architecture. Architecture where the room very clearly flows from one to another, and there's a lot of big open spaces that go onto each other. You have to be more concerned with that cohesion. If you have a series of rooms that are not connected, I think you can go from blue to yellow to green without the same problem. I don't think it's a mandatory that you sort of say, I'm going to limit my palette to these 3 colors for this house or this apartment. I think you've got more freedom when there are separations of rooms. When there are not separations, then I really do try to find what is going to be the connector. At my last chateau, I decided to use green as the connective color, and it was used as the trim in rooms. And so it wasn't in every room, but you got a sense as you were going through, that was a big, 45,000 square foot chateau, that you had some sense of connection with the different rooms that was done through the green. And I intentionally chose green because I wanted to remind you of nature and the connection between that property and the gardens outside.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Metropolis Think Tank Thursdays. Today, we are very pleased to be hosted by X Collaborative in New York. We will be discussing how sensitively designed amenities in both commercial office buildings and multifamily residential buildings can positively influence each other to give people the spaces they need to be at their best. Hosting an event like this requires support of great firms like FX Collaborative and our incredible sponsors. We like to thank Arcom, Woven by Imagination, Arden Studio, high performance glass solutions that inspire great ideas, engage collective thinking, and elevate every space. Growy, designing and engineering innovative water products for bathroom solutions and kitchen fittings. LX Houses, committed to creating human-friendly, eco-conscientious spaces by offering innovative premium quality surfacing and flooring solutions. And Versteel, a solutions provider of American-made furnishings for working and learning environments. And now I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Metropolis's editor-in-chief, Avi Rajagopal.
Thank you so much, Tina. And thank you all for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about third spaces and how they've become so much more important in how we think about designing spaces and buildings. We're so used to thinking about architecture and interior design practice, about real estate development, about space planning and strategy in silos. We think about commercial spaces versus residential spaces, healthcare spaces versus hospitality spaces. And one of the many things, one of the many huge shifts that the pandemic has caused in society is that it has kind of distributed activity in ways that were not distributed before. And one of those is work, but also living. So we've come to this point where our apartments are being tried in ways that they've never been tried before. I know a lot of you are joining us today from bedrooms or hastily converted home offices, and that is true of most of us working in the United States today. So we're today going to understand, how can we take stock of this moment and what are the lessons it holds for both commercial spaces as well as for residential spaces? And what are those sort of new typologies of spaces, amenities, or activity areas that can help us support living at our best and working at our best? And how can we do that for a diverse group of people and addressing all the different ways in which we have our own preferences for work and lifestyles? To help us do that today, we have a fantastic group of panelists. Thank you so much for joining us, all of you. Kimberly Petridis is the Director of Residential Interiors and a Senior Associate at FX Collaborative. Thanks for joining us, Kimberly. We also have with us Wilfredo Rodriguez, who is the Director of Interior Architecture at FX Collaborative. Will, thank you so much for joining us. And also Zebulon Mellison, who is the Director of Design and Construction at Beam Living. Zebulon, thank you so much for joining us today. Kimberly, let's start with you. In your work in residential interiors, how has work become a consideration? How are you thinking about how people work in the properties that you are designing now? And how are you thinking about different types of spaces and whether they support work, a consideration that maybe was not top of mind pre-pandemic?
I think there's a multitude of ways that we're thinking about how people work. So there's where people are working within their spaces and also what's going on in the apartment. So are they in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment by themselves, or are they with their children or dog or partner? We're trying to start to incorporate spaces that we could see that we would be able to put a desk, being able to make it so that you could work and not necessarily see the rest of what's going on in the apartment. One of the big things we saw during the pandemic, it still continues, but during the pandemic, is that people worked at home and their kids were also home at the same time. So having some kind of shielding, even if it's just being able to close a door where the person's working or have an offset view so that you don't see all the chaos that's going in the background. That way it doesn't affect your working. And also just having some kind of acoustical barrier between the two is a huge deal. So I think we really started looking at how to start to utilize office spaces within residential units, especially in New York, since they are such small apartments. And, you know, we think about every single square inch we can possibly get. So we started thinking even more about how to utilize that, because previously, a lot of the times, especially when you're designing for apartments in Manhattan, is we want them to be beautiful, we want them to be luxurious, we want them to be comfortable, but we understand people live in New York to go out. They live to be in the amenities or go to a great restaurant or go to a show or walk around Soho. But now, since people are spending so much more time at their home, they're starting to think about how they utilize their home in a very different way. So that tiny bedroom, having an extra 5 feet in it that they can stick a desk, makes a huge difference. And I saw a lot of people that lived in studios during the height of the pandemic move into just having a 1 bedroom because they could work in their living room and then just go into their bedroom to sleep. And just being able to separate the 2 spaces made a huge impact on how they felt. In addition to that, adding in terraces wherever we can, so people do have outdoor space. Within the amenities, it's great to have that for people to be able to utilize that, but also within the units, if it's possible, just being able to go outside. You can, if you get a Wi-Fi repeater, you're able to work outside. Just having the ability to have fresh air, see outside, feel the crisp air in the fall while you're working, getting a little bit of break, it really makes a big difference in how people are feeling in their space. And it helps to break up the monotony of working from home, because it is a great thing, but in the office, you have a variety of spaces that you're moving through. When you're just stuck in an apartment, you have just what's in the apartment. So being able to add variety makes a big difference. I think we also saw that in the amenities as well. We started to see more requests for private offices, phone booths, convertible spaces that could be made into conference rooms. So they could be utilized as, say, a TV room, but then if we had a sliding door and we could bring in a training table, it could then be used as an informal conference room for someone who's in the building who wants to then utilize it for their coworkers or just, you know, for themselves.
I think it's really interesting that so many of the things that you describe, some of the things at least that you described, Kimberly, are are amenities that most people would have considered valuable pre-pandemic. I mean, who doesn't want 5 feet more in their bedroom? But I'm thinking specifically about terraces or outdoor spaces, which kind of have always been a treasured amenity, especially in New York City, but certainly in every city, I think. But what's interesting is that they're now becoming so much more important in sort of the calculus, the decision-making matrix that most people might have around, how they want to live or where they want to live. And of course, certainly what you were saying about the amenity spaces, having flexible, convertible kind of amenity spaces, that is new. That is definitely new. I mean, we're seeing amenity spaces, with libraries and, desks and sort of co-working areas before. But, I think, again, the pandemic kind of puts new pressure on all of those things. A quick note as we continue, quick note to everyone who's listening today and watching us. We can take your questions at any time, so please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. Most of you who've attended think tanks before know how the drill goes. Go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A tab. We'll start taking them in a few minutes here. Any thoughts, any comments, any responses are welcome. Anything at all. We are here to extend the conversation with you. So please go ahead and put those in Q&A. I'd like to bring Zebulon, just building on what we just spoke about with Kimberly. Do you feel like work-related amenities are now more of a decisive factor in where and how people choose to live, and sort of how are you thinking about that, as somebody who leads design and construction for a real estate management company? You manage some of the most, I think, iconic residential properties in New York City. How are you thinking about this new pressure around work in residential properties?
So I mean, it's actually a very interesting question that you pose, because the workspace, and particularly as it relates to the rentability of our units, to kind of harp on a little bit what Kimberly was mentioning, the spaces and the properties that did the best were actually the ones that had the larger units. So our properties in Queens, for example, larger footprints, they did better during the pandemic in a way of vacancy. So from a management perspective, the space that you had said, you're right, it's always something, there's always a premium, but now I think the value is exponentially higher because of the hybrid working situation. As it relates to the amenity spaces and the desire for people to have the ability to work in, not necessarily always being in your apartment, going to a shared common space, I think those are really, really valuable. And we've seen a significant uptick and a request for these spaces on our properties. So as an organization, we're very resident aware and very cognizant of making sure that the residents have spaces that are, accommodate their needs. So something that we've done is we've started to take underutilized ground floor spaces, could be apartment units that have been vacated, that we can no longer lease, commercial spaces that are no longer being able to be filled or rented, and converting them to multi-use space. In fact, we've done that up and down First Avenue in 3 other locations on top of the spaces we already owned and managed inside of our property. So I think as a management company, I think the challenges that come are about how to make space flexible, right? How do you use design to make it flexible? And then how do you have it address if it's an ancillary space and it's kind of underutilized? There's probably a reason. Either it's not well lit, the ventilation requirements, there's all these things that as designers, we have to be able to, it's almost like an inherent design challenge that's built into these spaces and forces us to kind of think about the paradigm of what these spaces can be used for differently. And there's a significant influx of people coming in asking for these spaces. So to answer your question simply, yes.
But I think you hit upon there the crux of the matter is that that flexibility, and also it's really interesting that there's so much movement going on to meet this new demand, right? So as you were saying, taking on those vacant spaces or underleased spaces, turning them into flexible space, and as a residential real estate manager, I don't know if you've ever been in the business of managing what is essentially a workspace, right? Yeah. And that comes with its own set of challenges, I bet.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, to speak to a little bit to that, we kind of do it. We have two different models that we've been currently using. We have a third party, which helps us manage some of the more, I'll call them defined spaces. So if we have an old commercial space, an old medical office that we turned into a lounge working space, a collective working space. That's managed by a third party, which makes our job as managers a little bit easier. And you work collectively with their designers to make the space, align with what the property branding is. The ones that are a bit more challenging, and we've been doing this to accommodate, because there's so many people that are working from home, the other challenge is as we do our capital renovations and our work on our properties, there's the added noise and nuisance of all of the things that we could normally do during the day, you can't do anymore because everyone's at home. So how do you address these concerns? So what we've started to do is we've made pop-up temporary spaces. We'll take a space, and based on the adjacent units, we'll move all those people and give them access to a Wi-Fi enabled, basically a furnished unit with desks and office spaces for them to temporarily work. So it's one of these, you end up, there's a multitude of challenges. And this is one of the things that was really successful in making sure our residents stayed happy.
For anybody who's a workplace designer or workplace strategist, as Will is, I'm sure this sounds very familiar. What do you do with teams that are working right now as you're refreshing the space? It's such a common workplace problem, right? At least it used to be pre-pandemic. It's like you move people into a flex space and then you may build a prototype, have them test it, So it's really interesting having somebody from the residential side talk very much like, how a workplace change management process works. That's really interesting. Any comments or thoughts on that from the audience? Please go ahead and put them in Q&A. Will, let's talk about the workplace side of this. What are the kinds of, it's almost like the mirror or the connector to what we're hearing from Kimberly and Zebulon here. What are some of the spaces that you're thinking of in workplace projects or corporate interiors projects that act as that bridge between, now the spaces that people are occupying where they live and working where they live? What are some of those third spaces? What are those connecting spaces? And how is that factoring into your thinking about corporate interiors?
I think the workplace itself was already taking a move towards a more hospitality-oriented workplace. I mean, workplace has gone through a lot of cycles throughout the history. It started back in the day, everything was done at work from home, and then industrialization came and we started generating the office. We created spaces to have people together and work together. And now recently, the pandemic really made us rethink or gave the opportunity to reevaluate rather than build upon what was done before, but build upon the new way of thinking. And to me, the connectors, rather than being connectors, are more, they amplify the view of workplace being as a whole network or of nodes of experiences that actually connect your workday and your life. And those can be reflected in different ways, right? We've learned that the flexibility has become a key in working in our day-to-day life and balancing our life too. And components such as, let's just say they could be categorized in different curated work modes. that are curated to like reflect different types of how people work, and just quickly labeling some. There are moments where you really need to focus, and I think Workplace has to provide those places to focus, which could be also be done at home on a residence too. It's a benefit. There's also moments to collaborate with people, and that can be done remotely, in person, or a hybrid version, which we're seeing more and more these days. There are moments where people come together and socialize. I think that's an important aspect of these connector spaces or nodes. The human being is a very social person. We're social by nature, and we fuel and we get recharged by having those moments of connection with other people. And spaces that actually promote that within the workplace, I think are very important. There's also moments for recharging and pausing and rebalancing your day. You know, we live our busy day-to-day life, and those moments of pause that can support your work day are very important too, such as simple wellness room or a lounge or even the moments in between, the ability to step out, like Kimberly was saying, and into a terrace and take a recharge, which can also double up as a work mode. And other places, if possible, to actually be able to clear your mind, take a yoga class during class and all that. Those are moments that actually we've learned. A lot of people we've learned through the past 2 years that people went to the office, let's say 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever, and they just worked. But during the pandemic, people started taking a yoga class and at lunch, or like going up for a walk at the park. And I think, like Kimberly was saying, said something very, very interesting, which I think it also reflects on the workplaces, the ability for the work modes to branch out, especially in cities like we are and in other places, and really connect to the environment that sort of surrounds where you work and where you live, and almost all that networking or ecosystem, let's call it, becomes part of it. And the boundaries really, I think, the office and corporate interiors can learn a lot from the residential movement, and how throughout the years the residents were really provided with a bunch of amenities and a lot of spaces that actually supported the way you live and make you feel comfort and all those feelings of ease and pause. And also reflecting back into the residences, like we were saying before, and Sabine touched base on how what we can learn from how if we can provide spaces that reflect how people work differently, different work modes that I was mentioning before. I think that's the key to really the future and how we're going to work. And that's on a micro scale. On a macro scale, when you think of corporate interiors as a larger building, for example, I think it's a good opportunity for whether it's a developer or a building owner to really provide or try to provide just as possible that ecosystem that supports your day and offers you that diverse environment that actually covers call it all the nodes within the ecosystem or the network of it. Gyms, we've seen more days people adding doctors, in-house doc in the bus, where you can step down or get your, if you have a sore throat, you can get checked. Where flexible work modes, where you can actually allow to, like, co-working is a part of it. That's part of the whole larger buildings. Like, it allows for expansion and contraction. Gyms, fitness centers, libraries where you can focus on being quiet. All these different spaces are it really taken a lot from the residency, but also from, and I was waiting to touch on this, from the educational work. Network, right? If you look through all the campuses and the historic, they were designed to provide all this. Like, you didn't have to step outside of your campus and you had everything you need. But I think the corporate interiors and the larger scale could actually adapt some things from that model and from the residential and combine it all into these third spaces that are not just a desk in our office, right? Yeah. But rather support your different work modes. And I spoke a lot, but I just got excited.
Oh my God. No, there's so many good ideas in there. I think, Will, first of all, I love this idea of not thinking of connections as being types of spaces, but rather as connections as being types of activities. So, like, you know, if focus is the type of activity, how do you achieve focus at home, and how do you achieve focus in a work environment? Or what are the different ways in which you can achieve focus in either place? Same with collaboration, same with relaxation or respite or rejuvenation. I think that's a really interesting provocation, because, you know, for a minute, I was thinking about the activities at home as focus, collaboration, rejuvenation. And, for some people, a kitchen is an area of focus. For some people, the kitchen is an area of collaboration. And for some people, the kitchen is an area of relaxation and rejuvenation. So, I think it's really interesting when you start to think about attitudes towards space, how those start to layer on top of each other. So I love that idea. I think, as you were saying, there's a lot that, different types of spaces can learn from each other. And certainly, the idea about, having a doctor nearby. Just last week, our think tank discussion was about, how do we do community development post-pandemic around healthcare access. And I think that's really interesting too, is that, we saw large office campuses take that on, recently. I remember, 3 or 4 years ago, we were talking about the new Coca-Cola additions to the Coca-Cola campus in Atlanta, and they were talking about bringing a doctor on campus as a big new amenity. Eli Lilly, same thing in Indiana, so a lot of these big corporations were already thinking of that. And of course, we know that for large residential communities, that has always been a consideration, right? And so it's really interesting how those worlds are colliding, even in terms of, how spaces are being planned. So there's a lot in what you said. And then the higher education bit, I actually want to dive into that a little deeper in a few minutes, because I think there's a lot there in terms of how some of us once lived on campuses as students and how similar that is to how we live our lives today. But I'll come to that in just a minute. A quick reminder to our audience, I see a question coming into Q&A. We're ready for your questions. So anytime you want to jump in here, please go ahead, put it into Q&A, and we'll start taking those questions in just a few minutes. Lots of interesting talk about new models and new alignments between workplace and residential projects here and higher education. So please come in here. While you're thinking of that, we're going to put up another poll on your screen here. We're looking to gather information around how your patterns of specification and other things are changing. This particular one is about sustainability. So if you can take a second and respond, that would be great, as we try and gather information on how interior design and architecture practice are changing during the pandemic. Quick thank you to FX Collaborative for bringing us together today. Thank you so much for being our hosts for today's session. And a thank you, of course, to our sponsors, Arcom, Ardent Studio, Growy, LX Houses, and Versteel for making today's discussion possible. I'd like to kick off a larger question here for a second. And I want to talk about how each of you think about diversity in your work. And, because different groups of people have different work preferences, whether it's by generation or gender or profession or access to resources. They also have different levels of comfort with hybrid work. I think, some people are, I come from a generation where I was, working in a Starbucks anyway. So it's not such a huge deal to have my dog bark and, construction happen around me, because we're used to that noise. Other people may not be as used to that, right? So there's different comfort levels. So how are you thinking about sort of addressing the needs of different groups of people who might have different needs, whether it's in commercial spaces or in residential spaces?
I think one of the things I'm looking to see if it's going to change is the way that amenity spaces are set up and the ability to adjust them to create higher acoustical comfort. Because I think some people work better if there's no noise. Some people work better with a little bit of chatter in the background, and it really depends what you grew up with, what you're used to, what type of person you are, what your comfort levels are. So I'm wondering if there's going to be some kind of a change in the way that we include acoustical materials, because when you're designing a workspace, you'll include a lot of that and make sure that you have acoustical baffles or noise masking or things like that. Whereas in residential, we do take that into consideration, but not to the same level because the spaces wouldn't be utilized by so many people trying to focus at once. Whereas now I think you're seeing people that are going into those workspaces within the amenities and working for long periods of time, not for an hour or two or a couple hours before they wait for their friends to come and then they're going to play pool or hang out by the pool. So I'm really wondering if that's going to have a big impact because I know that they already have acoustical fabrics for hospitality that you can put into the drapery. So I think that we're going to see more acoustical panels that are concealed on the walls. I think it's going to be a bigger consideration on the ceilings. I think that we might have sound masking that's going to start coming into play, and the adjustability of the spaces, being able to have doors that will slide. But once you do that, you also have to make sure that everyone can utilize those spaces because if you have big doors, they get heavy. So you have to make sure that it's beautiful, but it's also accessible for every type of person that is going to be utilizing the space.
Mm-hmm. And I think it goes back to what Kim is saying of flexibility. It's key to support the diversity of people and how different people react to different or the different preferences for different work modes, right? Some, like Kim was saying, some people are fine, and there's some people that actually grew up or studied in the library to be quiet, and some people studied or worked in the student center. I'm using the educational again, but it's because it does have a full campus or ecosystem of different work places, and I think there is still a certain level of uncertainty of how workers will navigate and how the residential demands might be. But I think the smarter that we can provide spaces to adapt and respond to that flexibility, I think the better it's going to respond to that or uncertainty. If that makes sense.
But to harp on the flexibility, I think is critical, and I think the demographics of the people using the spaces is very diverse. I think there's a really broad band of people. There's the younger, more tech-savvy generation that's very facile. They can work on a laptop pretty much anywhere. Like we have courtyard spaces, you see them all scattered throughout our courtyards. Whereas people who were used to being in a traditional office setting have a really hard time. They have a module control of Zoom meetings and decibel levels and quiet spaces. To go on to what Kimberly was saying about the acoustics, I think acoustics and lighting are going to be absolutely critical as how we think about these spaces being used by diverse groups of people. Because at one point you want to be productive and focused, but then you also have to take a Zoom call. So do you step out and what is that? What's the diagram of how you use that space as you walk through it and function? And how are you moving around it, right? And then kind of begs sort of the question, do we have the infrastructure and technology in our spaces? I know that in our older buildings, we're not set up for Wi-Fi everywhere. We don't have hotspots everywhere. So cell service, as you get closer to the East River, it's not as good as if you are on the avenues. And I think these are things that are real, especially in older multifamily complexes that are all encompassing. I think those are some of the challenges we're going to have about how we choose where those locations are in relationship not only to adjacent spaces, so that you can go outside and walk into a space. There's a cafe close by, so that the one space doesn't have to be a catch-all for everything. So I think those are the challenges that we're working through, and to see how those can be adapted into our spaces and our designs.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many new pressures, I think, on space, and thinking about things like acoustics and lighting, obviously, and when we talk about sort of people with different preferences and different behaviors, the other thought that comes to mind is also that, certainly those of us who've been at home for a long time and then have recently either come back in contact with our work colleagues or, attended work events or taken meetings in the office more recently after a long break, we find ourselves a little rusty on the social, kind of connections, right? And I wonder if there's also something a little weird for some people about, having office-like behavior in essentially an amenity space in their home, right, or in their home building, right? So, sorry, as a New Yorker, I'm just like, who's going to be the obnoxious person who's going to trash the place, right? But I think, in the offices we have conduct, we have people responsible for, kind of seeing that there's a certain type of conduct, there's a norm, there's an expectation. And I think it's really interesting to see how that culture plays out in residential spaces.
In some of the larger buildings that I've worked on, they do have someone who manages the amenity space. So I think that also makes a big difference, because there are people there making sure that no one's doing anything weird they shouldn't be doing or being overly loud. But I think that also, makes the need for flexibility and for adjustability even more important, because if the loud guy in the corner or woman in the corner is being annoying, you can then shut them out and keep that noise away from you. Whereas if it's just one big giant space, then everyone has to deal with it. So I think that's a good point. It really does drive home how important it is to have some type of flexibility to create these private spaces that you aren't hearing everyone in the room. Something that I found really surprising when I did go back to the office was my level of tolerance for noise around me has gone down significantly. I'm used to having one person in the room with me, and that's it. And that's my husband. And I live in Jersey City. I'm on a pretty quiet street, so I'm not hearing a lot of noise. We went to our new office for FX in Brooklyn. I noticed how quickly I started picking up on the noise, because we are a big, wide open space. And when I was first there, I started to utilize our phone booths that we had to go into there to just get a little bit of quiet, because you do have to reacquaint yourself with an office, with the way that people are in an office, how you interact. It's a really big shock to the system to have all of a sudden, it's like, hi, there's all these people here and 4 of them are talking at the same time in one big room. So I was surprised by that.
Yeah.
Operationally, as we roll out more spaces, it's actually super hard for us to manage those spaces. I think in the pre-plans, like I could speak to our own office and our pre-planned managed spaces, those are fine. It's the ones that we don't go in all the time, or they're a quick conversion, or we don't have, the staff is just, everyone is so stretched and the resources are so stretched with additional protocols and making sure you have security entrances. There's all these other logistical parts that, I'd love to say it rolls out very easily, but I'll be here to be the pragmatic one. It does not, and it is messy. And, Desh, I love the fact, true New Yorker, somebody is definitely going to trash the place. Unfortunately. And then how do you make the selections? How do you make the selections of the furniture that are not only commercial grade, but can kind of withstand, that beating, but still make it feel warm and comfortable and a place you want to go to? So how do you balance those decisions?
We actually have an audience question building on that, Will, so hold your thought for a second. Eric Crosby asks, is the new work scenario, affecting consumer choices in color, materials, and finishes? Are people making their choices based on hygiene or socioeconomic influences or something else? So, are you seeing tastes change? Are you seeing criteria for, materials change in projects, whether that be residential or commercial projects?
I would say yes, absolutely. It's specifically, there's a big move towards, yes, the hygienic portion, but it also trickles down into, if it's to make our workplace or our residents more hygienic and more safer, there's also that trickle down effect to think about them as what the impact of them on the health of the globe, right? And how, like, how sustainable are we doing with picking that? We've seen that. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but thanks to the pandemic, the conscious around that has really increased, and a lot of people are. It's almost becoming more and more of a standard finally, of like being conscious of what you're putting, what you're specifying, and how it affects not only the human being at the person scale, but at the global scale.
I think people have really seen how everything affects everything else. And they're starting to think about spaces in a different way as a result. So I agree with Will. I think people are looking for more sustainability. I also think people, when the pandemic first started, there was a really big rush to use non-porous materials. And I think people still want to use non-porous materials, but I think they understand now that it can't just be non-porous materials, because you do need to have some acoustical value to things. Otherwise, the noise is just going to ping around everywhere and everything's going to feel really cold. So I think it's a balance between the two to make sure your space is still feeling warm and also making sure that it's easily cleanable. I mean, we go through this with residential amenities all the time, because it's basically a commercial grade space, but it has to feel like a cool hotel or your home. So it's always a balance between the ability to clean it, have it be really magnetic and fun or calming and cool, depending on what you're going for in the space. And also with FX Collaborative, like sustainability is in our bones, it's in our ethos. So that's something that we really push forward. And that's one of the things that the point of view we come from. And I think that the pandemic has shown people that, a silver lining is that people are seeing, okay, global warming climate change does have an effect on my everyday life, because people weren't necessarily seeing that. And we've had, some really big issues with weather, and that has helped as well. But they're seeing if, deforestation, we're going to have more pandemics. It's not if, it's when it's going to happen again. So people, once it starts affecting them personally, they start to see it as an actual problem. And I think that I really do have hope that people are really going to try to make a change, especially with younger kids. As they move up into the workplace, they want different things, and they've grown up with a world that they've been told is in trouble, and it's really been put to the forefront of their minds. So I think that as spaces evolve and as different people start to utilize the different spaces, that really is going to be something that people are going to take into consideration more, because it's ultimately going to be a driver for if people are going to use that space. Is it going to be profitable to have this space? Because these are important things to people.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the decision-making process around sort of flexibility in spaces. How do you sort of imagine different use scenarios? How do you build that? Because we've been talking a lot about flexibility here, and it's come up even in this recent discussion. Just how do you predict different ways that people are going to make use of space in a residential area? And is that learning coming from corporate interiors? And then in workplace interiors, are we learning new scenarios that we have to build into flexibility for our spaces? Like, do we have to make our spaces do new things that maybe they weren't doing before? So like, for example, hybrid meetings. But let's talk about sort of how we're designing for flexibility, and then we'll take some more audience questions here.
From a workplace and corporate interiors perspective, I think the key is for a workplace is tailored to the audience, call it, for lack of a better term, but it's more designed or built purposely to serve a specific group of people, and it's translated to different groups of people, right? So the way we see it at FX is more like the workplaces really house your company's culture and who you are, and I think that it's a good start to start determining and rebalancing the space with the flexibility in mind and how we can tailor the solutions for each different groups. Because like you said before, tech companies work in a certain way, designers, architects, and more creative, collaborative people that work in a different way. And then there's also the financial model, just to say 3, they also work in a very different way. And I think flexibility comes as a tailored solution that's curated to the different groups. Yes, we are learning and we're adapting to different work modes. I go back to that term that didn't really weren't as common before, but I think the tailoring each to the different type of, call it company or type of profession, actually can provide that support that people are looking for. That's from the corporate interiors and workplace.
I was going to say, in the multifamily space, the flexibility is really about how an amenitized space can really cater to different groups at different times, because we know that the work mode happens even though there's a little bit of a pandemic shift, call it later start, earlier starts. The work period is still a grouping of time, and we're trying to take advantage of spaces that were traditionally programmed for playrooms or gyms and finding ways of letting those spaces be used for work as well. So it's for us, it's more the editing process. I think the idea of catering to one particular group and designing for one particular group, like Will said, we're moving things around, moving the different parts around, and making sure that the space, all by itself, it's furnished, it's fit, and it can, serve 2 functions, a night and day function, call it, just that simple, but it's not as simple as flipping the switch. So I think the idea behind designing it is to, make sure things are movable and mobile. There's nothing that is so specific designed for only one use. But I think it's very, that's for us is the real challenge, how to be able to not think as designers for that one person or that one demographic. Like how do you take that out of the equation and try to think very macro for a space? So that's, I think, the challenge that we're having in multifamily.
Yeah, I agree. We've been doing a lot of daytime, nighttime designing. So we think about how could this space be utilized during the day in a work mode, or in, as Will said, the different modes you work. So you have the focus mode, and then you have the, the more social mode, or the wanting to, answer your emails a little bit more of a relaxed mode, where you can just grab your laptop and you can sit on a sofa and you can put it on your lap and you can type, and that's not a problem. But can we provide laptop tables so people can actually get into a more focused form of working? Just different ways that we can make it so that people can utilize a space in a multitude of ways without it being a really hard thing to do, where you have to, get something big and heavy. We've been seeing conference rooms that are TV rooms. So they have loungy areas, but they also have the ability to bring in a table that then can be utilized as a conference table. And within that, you already have a TV in the room. So then you have your media center, so you can have a Zoom call with all your remote workers. So it's just finding a way to combine the two and then separate it out completely at night for the most part, because I think there is something that we've learned is that we definitely want to shut off the certain amount of work from our brains after hours, because there is this 24-hour work cycle that we fell into, and I don't think it's great for anyone to do that. We all need a little bit of downtime, and we're seeing that in the units as well, as being able to shut that off. So I think it's the adjustability and the flexibility, but having it be easy and have it be things that aren't easily breakable, which is always super important.
I think you touched a little bit on the verge of it, and so did Sebula and Kim. the real challenge is going to be how to provide the technological aspect of it, because touching on what we discussed in all the previous questions and all, there is a flexibility and a hybrid type of work mode that we all know that it's here to stay to a certain degree. I think it's common saying around different people that we work through on different conversations that the 5 days a week in the office, it's no longer going to be a thing, right? And that's from the technology point of view, it is a challenge and a kind of a cool challenge if you think about it, how we get creative around providing this infrastructure that supports what people are looking for, but also it's able to adapt to how the world adapts and different people. So.
And then also making it easy for everyone to utilize it, because there's a lot of really cool technology, but if you're not technologically savvy, you can't use it. So it's not very helpful. So I wonder, Zebulon, like how you've handled that, because I'm sure you're seeing all the issues with your build outs of having all these different systems and trying to make them work together, and then having people be like, nothing works.
And that, Kimberly, is the huge challenge. And I think let's just start with the basic Wi-Fi, right? Some people are able to find out the password and get onto the Wi-Fi. Others, it doesn't matter. We've tried everything from marquees on the tables to bulletin boards to digital displays with them. And how do you get the technology to work? How do you flip it from being a TV, so entertainment area, to automatically turning on your Zoom meeting and going into a Zoom huddle room? Like, even the people that are somewhat technically savvy, there's still a little bit of a tripping. It's not as seamless as you would like. It's not like you can walk in. The ideal situation, and this is our dream, would be a simple app. You walk in, you swipe your phone and access to get to the space. You hit your button and automatically it ties into the technology. But everybody on this panel and probably most of the listeners know that the backbone to get that to work is much more complicated. It's really nice when it happens that way, but in our experience, that's actually one of the big struggles that we have.
Oh my God, I really, really sympathize with the situation you're in. I mean, folks who work together day in and day out have such a huge problem getting in a conference room and getting the screen to work. And they're calling IT and like figuring out why my laptop works with the screen and not your laptop. And like, now I can just imagine strangers who live in a building doing that in a conference room that is a common amenity space. Just the passive aggressive notes will be interesting to read.
They call our resident services. So we have a resident services that's all web-based. So you can put in a ticket. So we'll get tickets for, I can't turn on the projector in this space. And we end up having to send an electrician or a handyman to go run the ticket. So just the overall backlog of how do we deal with this technology, I think, but Will said it right. It is a very unique, and I think it's a very, I think it's a good challenge to have. If we can find a way of making these spaces not only more accessible to a diversity of population and diversity of user type. It gets back to that question again about user type.
Yeah. One of our attendees has a really nice flip on the general direction of this conversation, which is mainly, I think, which is so much focused on sort of the work amenities in residential spaces. One of our attendees asks, in an office building typology, is it possible to include residential, whether firm or company dedicated or not, spaces like childcare spaces on different floors or partitioned parts of single floors? So instead of working from home, is there a scenario where there's a reverse of living at work or nearly so? It's a really, I think, interesting provocation. Will, I don't know if you want to talk about that for a second.
I would say absolutely, and that could be translated or it could be reflected in different ways. We've seen some projects where it's seen more as a campus, where a developer builds an office building and a residential building next to it, and what happens in between more of a park, almost like literally a campus with a quad and the two buildings that support, and everything you need is within the childcare, market, coffee shops, restaurants, health clinics, all that within. But we've also seen it within the same building where you have it all within it, and you live and work in the same building, call it, or the same entity, if you want to call it. And I think it is part of how people are thinking in the future of this work-life balance, live, work, play. There's many ways people frame it. And I think there is an opportunity to really rebalance and reshift the interest, and not so much dictate how people live, but more support how people live, and really be mindful of like, yes, this is what we want within a building or a campus or a series of 3 buildings. I don't know, that's not your question, but yes.
Yeah, and there's definitely, we used to talk about childcare at work as an amenity related to equity, for instance, right? We used to talk about, how it's such a huge factor in, women staying and progressing in the workforce, or women not feeling like they have to be, the sole sort of childcare in their family, right? That the kid can go with their partner to the office and and be cared for. So it's also interesting when we think about these amenities as sort of kind of opening up possibilities of different ways of working that maybe people have not thought about before, or that there were barriers to them before this. There's certainly advantages to virtual work for folks who have barriers in terms of mobility in the world, right? And so, or there's certainly advantages to certain types of work situations for folks who might be might identify somewhere on the neurodiversity kind of spectra, right? And so I think there's ways that this idea of how do we live at work and work where we live, that kind of opens up that conversation. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on removing barriers and improving accessibility through these amenities as a follow-up to that.
It's just, go ahead, Sabine.
No, I was going to say accessible, because all the buildings that we manage, they were basically built, they're iconic from the 40s and the 60s. So accessibility wasn't even considered. We've had to retrofit almost all of our buildings. In New York City, none of it's all sidewalk grades. There's none of it. So you've got to figure out a way of getting everybody into the spaces. But just to touch, Will, sorry, I cut you off. You were going to jump in. I was just going to say, in our multifamily, we definitely have accessibility problems across the board. So I think some of our decision making as to where we put these in our campuses, in our multifamily properties, is dictated by who can get to it. Accessibility to the corner retail that we'd like to always have on our properties, accessibility to fast food or transportation so they can go somewhere else. I think those are the choices that we make in where we locate the spaces in particular.
The one thing I was going to say is more that's why in the first question I responded more thinking of it as a network of the way we live, because I think that is a good way to start tailoring experiences and thinking of the different needs, such as childcare, such as the health department, such as accessibility. What's the experience for this different typography, or the different people, or the different demography, and how this, if you see it all as a network or ecosystem, call it, I think the easier it is to start really adapting and reflecting and tailoring for the different needs. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, we've also been used to thinking about workplaces, individual workplaces, as those kinds of ecosystems. Like providing different types of areas where people who have different work preferences can find something that works for them. And it's interesting now for us to think about sort of the neighborhood, the city, the 2 units connected by a commute, as a network, right? And that there are spaces that overlap between those two. I have a question here from Nico Gavino and a series of questions that kind of links to this idea. So I'm going to build them up one after another. Nico asks, I've been seeing neuroaesthetics pop up a lot where design or architecture is optimized to promote mental health. Neuroaesthetics in particular is I think, to do with designing spaces more in accordance with how the human brain works, and it's based on some of the research into how our brains work, whether or not related to mental health. But let's take the mental health part of it. Is there any consideration of the sort in any of your firms, especially as we see more people concerned about stress and burnout? So can we talk, you mentioned all this, and will your last typology of spaces was spaces for respite and rejuvenation, relaxation as well in your first response? Can we talk about designing healthy spaces, whether that be, in residential settings or workplace settings? Maybe Kim, you want to go first on this, and then Will, you can come in.
I think we've always, depending on the type of space that we're designing, taken into account the way that you're going to react to the materials and the lighting, and that we'll do a softer lighting if we want it to be a calmer space with cooler colors, because you're going to react to that naturally. But I also think that when you're thinking of a healthy space, you also have to look at the materials that you're utilizing. And what are they off-gassing? Like what are you taking in when you're designing those spaces? And if you realize it or not, you are reacting to that, and you're going to have, naturally, you're going to calm down, or you're going to peak up depending on the different materials that are used in the space. So I think, I don't know that we can necessarily design for mental health, beyond making sure that it's not like something that typically people would respond in a really reactive way, because culturally, depending on where you're from, really, really cool lights might be great and you feel comfortable in them, or if you're somewhere else, you might feel better if you're in a warmer light. So I don't know that we can put it to just one thing. I think it's different spaces, having different types of materials and different types of lighting and different acoustics. That's really going to, I think, affect how people are feeling within those spaces. And when possible, having the adjustability to that, where there's no reason that we need to have all the lights on if it's a bright day and you're sitting in an amenity space. There are different modes that it can go through that will then bring it down so the levels will be even. And I think that brings it back to the adjustability, and that creates a much higher comfort level for people, I think. And in that, you're going to feel more relaxed and healthier. And if you have healthy materials throughout the space that aren't off-gassing and aren't destroying the earth, that also will help as well.
I think also that everything that Kim's saying is definitely super important, but also we design spaces to make you feel comfortable, and comfort for me is not the same as comfort for you, right? So the more we can start integrating different aspects that actually are proven to really make people feel supported, more productive, happier. Some people really react well to having plants around them, and the biophilia is something that's super important. The natural lighting, it's a known fact that working in a place that actually provides with ample natural lighting, not so much a sterile place, really makes a big difference. Even in our offices right now, we are really making a push as an office, a company, to really get well certified, get our projects well certified, and really incorporating that all the mental wellness, such as the circadian lighting rhythms, really implementing that into our office. And we start by practicing what we preach, and really there are ways to really respond to the mental, and really design consciously of mental well-being, providing spaces for comfort, providing spaces for stepping away from the burnout, right? You need that. Providing biophilic design that actually makes you connect to outdoors or the planet, providing natural lighting. There's so many options out there, and I think now with the pandemic, it's really people are really starting to make that move towards, yes, mental well-being is a thing, and we actually should think about the wellness and well-being of people. And I said a few examples of that. There's a long list of what we try to incorporate in our projects, but yeah, it is, we can actually think of that and as part of our design process and really incorporate it from the beginning, because it makes a big difference on how people react and feel in the space, which ultimately is what makes you more productive and happier when you're working life, right? That well-being.
Yeah, I'll just put in a small plug here, if you don't mind, that the well-building standard that Will mentioned, he said well certified or well designed to well standards. That well-building standard has a mind concept among the 7 concepts that it uses to certify spaces. And the mind concept definitely deals very deeply with mental health. And the great news is that the standard is available on the website. So even if you are not a well-accredited professional or you're not necessarily designing a well-certified space, it's a great place to just go take a look at to even understand what are the different factors that affect mental health. And yes, indoor air quality, which Kim mentioned, is a huge factor. Natural light is a huge factor. Biophilia is a factor. There's lots of different things that can make a difference. So I urge everyone who's listening to take a look at the mind concept in the well-building standard. Not saying that you have to get your project certified or anything, that's up to you, but I think it just gives you an interesting framework and a set of starting points to think about things. Connected question, I said there's a few questions that are connected to that. A quick connected question here is breakout spaces. Kim, you spoke about this. It's very hard to, when we are in the office, we were used to, but also rebelling against this idea that we have to sit at a desk the whole day and do a similar kind of activity over and over again, right? So the idea was that you could take your laptop somewhere, you could go sit outside and work, so on and so forth. So that idea of variety was really important. And a big part of that is, breakout spaces as something related to mental health. So I'd love to hear from all 3 of you in terms of just, how do you give people a space that really feels like a third space? If, where they live is also where they work now, right? Like, what do you think is most vital as a breakout or a real true sort of third space when things that used to be third spaces, like amenity spaces, now have become first or second spaces, depending on how you live your life, right? So where do we go and find those third spaces? So I'd love to hear some thoughts on that.
I think the spaces that have become first and second spaces outside the apartment, like the amenity spaces, I do think to a certain degree can become the third spaces depending on your point of view. I know from my personal experience during the pandemic, the first summer, I spent a lot of time working outside, and during the day, that was my office. I worked on my deck, and then when I wanted to take a break, I would then move over to my hammock and sit in my hammock and answer emails there. So I had this like mental break that I understood there was a delineation between this is this type of work and this is this type of work. So I think that people are going to utilize, I think there's a blurring that's going to happen to all these spaces. So I think they're all in one. And it's just the point of view that you're having and how you're seeing them at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just my take on third spaces is an ancillary space where you're no longer doing your primary activity. Right? And that's kind of maybe that's my own layman's definition of what that is. And on most of our campus, it's the outdoor space. It's the outdoor spaces that really make our properties either successful or not successful. And it's the programming of those spaces, whether it's the FF&E selections to make sure that the chairs are movable and the tables can be moved here and there, that the surfaces can be walked on, and simple things like making sure all the windows open and close so that people can get the fresh air into their units. But I think the idea of breakout space, when you said it, it was really strong about the landscape and the environment outside of the building itself. I think the amenities, Kimberly touched on it, the amenity spaces and their flexibility are unfortunately limited because in New York, they're inherently limited by square footage. We don't have a lot of space to be able to create those breakouts. So I think the outdoors has really become really important, and how we think about the outdoor-indoor relationships to our spaces.
I think that's one of the spaces that's been utilized the most since the pandemic. Yeah. I don't know that I would have really thought to even work outside, you know, if I was a random day that I was working from home, but once I was here all the time, going outside, that became like, even though I'm working there, that became like a treat to me to be able to hear the blue jay outside making noise while I'm working. So it also helped to bring a sense of calm. I think that was also really nice, and I think was really healthy. And I really hope everyone has the ability to do that. I know at our new office, we actually have a terrace that we incorporated so that we are going to be able to do that as well, because we know that it's really important for everyone to be able to be outside, to feel the wind, to hear nature, and just take a moment and take a breath and allow you to enjoy working. I think that's something that a lot of us got so burnt out from everything that we stopped enjoying working. And I think once you take a step back and you go into what a third space is, like the outdoors, that you, granted you are outside, but you are working, but it doesn't feel the same. It's kind of like when all of a sudden it starts getting dark, it starts getting light in the springtime when it's been dark all winter, and you leave and you kind of feel like you're leaving early, but you're not. You're still leaving when you're supposed to, but there's a shift in your perspective and how you're utilizing that space, because you have all these other outside factors that have changed it for you.
I would just jump in and say, I do like how you frame it, Sabine, of when you're no longer doing your primary type. I wrote it down, actually, I might quote you moving forward. But no, I think it is important to have that third space. And I think from an interiors and workplace point of view, spaces where we are literally designed to engage with people, to connect with people, and forget work for now. Let's just have a conversation, and let's be us, and let's get to know each other and connect and build relationship upon that we can enjoy in the future, right? And I think from the macro point of view, is what Kim and Sabine were saying, the outdoor space is a big thing. Connecting it to a terrace just outside of your office, or connecting it to a plaza like the one we have right here, that you can actually feel the break, or the stepping out, or really no longer detachment from that primary task, and really just be able to be yourself. And that has implication from the, like you were saying, some of the furniture you select, how the space is lit, how the space is ventilated, or naturally or mechanically, and all those things. But the third space, to me, it's all over us. It's up to us how we can use it, right? And obviously there are some that are more tailored to that and literally detach and just be you. And there's spaces that can be kind of the hybrid moment, like places to connect within an office, or as the terrace within an office, right? There's a big spectrum, but I think they're very important. And I think there's ways to shape around them and really promote their use to be successful.
We have a parallel question here about focus spaces. And I know we talked a lot about that right in the beginning, in terms of, how do we give people acoustic privacy? How do we give people light? I'll take maybe just one or two thoughts, if you guys have any more, on focus spaces and the design of focus spaces in whatever setting we're talking about, whether residential or workplace, or in third spaces or elsewhere.
Tough question to answer.
Yeah. The specific question from the audience member is privacy more important than sound for a shared space, or sound more important than privacy? And I love this. I feel like I know what the response is going to be, but maybe we can take that as a specific subset of it.
Well, I think you can do both. I think they're equally as important. So, I mean, I think that you can create an area that you have something like a phone booth, right? And if you have a sliding door, you can have it open and everyone can see in and everyone can hear and you can be part of the space. But then if you have the option to pull the door closed and say you have some kind of slightly reflective glass, you get privacy, but then you also are able to see out. So you're still connected. So I think they're both like really, I think they go hand in hand because sometimes you need to have the separation from the distractions to be able to get privacy and also get the acoustics. So I think that we're going to see more acoustical panels and acoustical treatments within spaces like that. We're going to see more double walls so that you're not hearing the person next to you that's on their earphones screaming on their Zoom call, you know, because that's something that you wouldn't really consider before. Phone booths were probably used just for focused work as opposed to someone who's talking. So I think it's not something that was considered to the same degree as it is now. But I definitely think they're equally as important. I think they can both be achieved together and also make it so that you can feel like you're connected and then you can shut the world off and be in your own little space.
Yeah.
So our biggest complaint though, our biggest complaint from residents is acoustic and noise. So whereas I agree with Kimberly that you can achieve both in design spaces, I think the overarching problem that we have in multifamily housing with people working from home all the time is how do you make that sound separation? In most of the buildings, they had no code that required STF 50 between the spaces. It didn't exist. And anybody who's been in an old pre-war building knows very well, you know exactly what the neighbor's doing. That happens all the time. We now need to consider, we started to consider, how do you fur walls? We'll take space away in order to give you the acoustic separation. And we realized that we're able to retain more residents in our spaces if we're able to give them that, which is, I think, maybe answers some of the questions from a bit of a pragmatic point of view.
Love that. I love that. Yeah, it's something that, I think in workplace design, people really woke up to, a few years ago as well. And now there's so much research to support that as well. Just engagement and retention improve significantly. Turns out it does so in residential settings as well. I'm going to have one last question for all my panelists. And I'll ask you the question now and give you a minute to think about it. I'd like to hear, given this new paradigm, like we live in this network of spaces now, we are much more flexible in how we use space. We're putting all this extra pressure in terms of technology, acoustics, and all of the things we spoke about on residential spaces. We are really, trying to sort of keep workplaces relevant and useful to people in terms of collaboration and, things like that, in terms of more organizational goals. So there is a new paradigm here. And I would love to hear sort of, what do you think some of the biggest design opportunities are in this space? Where do you think, as designers and architects, we can make a sort of really big difference in people's lives and in how they work? I'm going to give you a minute to think about that. In the meantime, a quick thank you to FX Collaborative, of course, for hosting today's panel, for bringing us together, for suggesting the topic, and for this incredible conversation. Thank you so much, Zebulon, Kimberly, and Will, for all your insights so far. And a quick thank you, of course, to our sponsors, Arcom, Arden Studio, Growy, LX Houses, and Versteel for making today's discussion possible. Think Tank continues in a couple of weeks. We're back November 4th with a discussion that's actually a really great extension of today's conversation. We're talking with Smith Group about the far-reaching tentacles of work, how things that are changing in the workspace are now having larger real estate implications across cities and across communities. So, talking about it more, I think from, what are some of the implications of the changing work models that we're seeing today. So we're going to dive a little deeper into that in a couple of weeks. So I do hope you'll join us. Registration link It will be in the chat. And also, since we've talked so much about mental health, and thanks to Will and Kimberly as well, talked so much about sustainability and responsible material selection, I would be remiss if I didn't remind everyone that we now have the first ever interior design pledge for positive impact, which has been created by all three major interior design associations in North America, ASID, IIDA, and the Interior Designers of Canada, and with Metropolis. And the pledge really talks about the interconnections between ecological, health, that is climate, human health and well-being, as well as equity, and how all three of those goals are goals for interior design practice. So I hope all of you will join us in this movement, take the pledge. We're hoping to put forth many more resources for interior designers in particular, in terms of how you can meet some of the goals and really ambitious targets that the pledge sets out. So I do hope you'll take a look at that. Okay, last question for all our panelists. Let's talk about where are the big design opportunities now, right? So what are some of the things we need to figure out? Where are the answers not clear, but that creative solutions can be really impactful and effective? So whoever would like to go first.
Don't all jump in at once.
Whoa.
I'm trying not to talk over people.
I'll harping back to what something I had mentioned before. I think as I see it in our space, in the multifamily space, one of the largest challenges that I think as designers we can tackle is the rollout and the implementation of technology to be able to make the spaces more flexible and make the spaces address all the things that we talked about on this panel. And I wanted to thank Kimberly and Will for inviting me to sit in this session, and Metropolis Magazine for having me. So it's been quite a pleasure. But I think as a designer, the implementation of these really great tools, how do we put them into these amenity spaces, these third spaces, to be able to give equitable access to all of our residents and the public? How do we get them not only activated, but allow them to, live in the space that they're not only living in, but working in? I think that's, for me, the biggest design challenge that I think as designers we can take on. It's in front of us and it's very forward thinking. So that's my thought.
I second what Zebulon said, but I also think that there is a really exciting challenge in creating spaces that really are making even more of an impact on people's lives than they were previously. People were utilizing amenities before, but now it's a completely different ballgame in the way that people are using amenities. They've become their workplace, they've become their hangout, they've become their party space. So being able to create a space that is accessible and equitable and sustainable, has great acoustics, has technology that everyone can use, I think it's really gonna grow in the next few years, because we will have trial and error in what we can do and what makes sense for everyone, and also seeing what people respond to, because we can always say this is what people want, but until you really test it out, you don't know what people are gonna respond to. So I think there's a really exciting challenge coming forward with all of that. And I also want to say thank you very much for having us on the panel. You're an amazing monitor, and this has been really a great conversation. And thank you so much, Zebulon, for being a part of this. And it's been great talking to Will as well.
I was thinking about it, and to me, I think the real challenge in a good way and to come up with greater solution is to really design for the hybrid work. And it is a real challenge to how can we design to it so that people really, from the work point of perspective, how do we, from a hybrid point of view, make people feel like they belong together, that there's a certain pride in being part of an organization, a group, team. That's going to be a real challenge, because obviously we have to provide those opportunities to really connect and make people feel that they are part of it. They're not working alone, right? We're together. We are here for a purpose. We share the same visions and all that. I think that's going to be a good challenge, and spaces to promote connections, because those are the things that really last. I always say, and experiences. I always say that people really remember spaces and all that, but they never really forget is how they make it feel, or how did you, what was your experience within that space? And I think that's a real challenge when you have a hybrid work mode or a hybrid way of work and living, right? You're not in your specific space all the time, but rather moving around. And the more we can try to map out something, because we're not going to get it from the get-go, but try and really learn and adapt as we learn. I think that's where the real challenge is, and we're looking forward to it. And I also want to thank you all for this. I think it's been good, and it's good to really talk these things that people actually are talking around, and nobody has a straight answer, but rather the more we can talk and exchange ideas and questions and put out in the world, I think that the easier it may be for us to really come up with creative solutions. So thank you.
Well, that's exactly what we want to do here with Think Tank. So thank you so much, all of you, for being so frank and open in sharing today, and for talking through your practice. Thank you for some of the real examples, for keeping it real with us, for acknowledging some of the challenges that you face. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today's session. For today's session, as you know, as always, today's session will be available in a couple of weeks on DesignTV by SANDOW, which runs on the websites of Metropolis and Interior Design, and will also be available for viewing later on our website. A write-up of today's discussion will also appear in a later issue of Metropolis magazine. So thank you all so much. I so appreciate you joining us today and for all the insights. Thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you all have a great evening.